Okay, welcome to the Fort Ord Reuse Authority regular meeting for Friday, August 11th, 2017. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If Colonel Brown would lead us.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, Authority Counsel John Giffen will read the closed session.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board and public. We're going into closed session on item 3A, Public Employment Government Code Section 54959.7B, Executive Officer Evaluation, and 3B, Conference with Legal Counsel, Government Code Section 54956.9D2, a matter of significant exposure to litigation.
Okay, is there anyone that wants to make public comment on those items?
Hello? Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, board members. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Bill Shiver. I'm here with my colleague Wilson Wendt. We're with a law firm, Miller Star Regalia, and we represent Marina Community Partners. And the reason that I'm here today is the matter that you're about to go into closed session on relates to a claim that was filed by Marina Community Partners relative to deconstruction work that it did in the project right around here. And we just wanted to give you a little bit of background with respect to that claim. I know that you had a workshop session a couple of weeks ago where you talked about deconstruction, the importance of deconstruction. Obviously, it's a FORA obligation. In 2006, 2007, Marina Community Partners entered into an agreement to do this deconstruction work, and FORA agreed to pay for it. And although there are some issues with respect to the timing of payment and whether some of that would come in the form of offsets against purchase price, the basic fact from our perspective is this is FORA's obligation. It's an obligation that the board took on. And at this point, our client has carried this obligation for many, many years. And what we need to do is we need to find some resolution to the issue. And that's important for a couple of reasons. One is, obviously, we want to try to avoid litigation and the expense and delay that causes. But I think more importantly, we want to facilitate the rest of the deconstruction in this area. And Marina Community Partners is a partnership with Shea Homes and some other partners. And until this issue is resolved and they know how this issue is going to be addressed, it's very hard for them from a financial perspective and just from a partnership perspective to go forward with the rest of the deconstruction in the subsequent phases, because the deconstruction that has occurred has been in phase 1 and some in phase 2, but there's still obviously a lot more deconstruction to be done. And I know that is a priority of the board. You know, just looking around, that is what drives the economic redevelopment of this region. And so we'd like to get into a mediation context where we can talk to FORA and the representatives of FORA. I've worked with your counsel, John Giffen. He's an excellent attorney, an excellent person, and I don't doubt that if we sit down and talk about this.
Thank you, sir. Your time's up.
Okay. Can I just finish up briefly?
No, time's up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this? All right, let's go to closed session. And I'm going to go straight to the legislative session. Right after roll call. Mr. Given, can you read us out?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members of the board and public, the board met in closed session under items 3A, Public Employment, Government Code Section 54959.7B, Executive Officer Evaluation, and 3B, Conference with Legal Counsel, Government Code Section 54956.9D2, a matter of significant exposure to litigation. The board heard from counsel on 3B, made their recommendations. There's nothing to report out on 3B, and there's nothing to report out on 3A as well.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Parker, Supervisor Adams, Supervisor Phillips, Mayor Edelin, Councilmember O'Connell, Councilmember Morton, Councilmember Hoffa, Mayor Rubio,
Here.
Councilmember Alexander, Mayor Carbone, Mayor Gunter, Councilmember Garfield, here, Councilmember Reimers, Kathleen Lee, Congressman Jimmy Panetta, Nicole Charles, Erica Parker, Debbie Hale, Dr. P.K. Diffenbach, Mike Zeller for Debbie Hale for Tampsey. Thank you. Steve Matarazzo, Dr. Ochoa, Colonel Brown, Bill Collins, Steve Crow, Michelle Overmeyer, Dr. Moore. Thank you. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We're going to respect the Congressman's time and jump ahead to the 2017 legislative session so that you can get back to your busy schedule. Michael, did you have something to say?
Just by way of introduction, which sometimes anyone with the last name of Panetta in this community doesn't need an introduction, but I did hear several comments earlier. Congressman Panetta's been eloquently giving us notes and comments about the updates that are happening in Washington, D.C., and has just opened the Spring Hill Suites just a block away from the office here this afternoon. And I heard in his introduction a claim that he had been washing dishes as one of his earlier times, and that actually was his father, and I want to make sure that was corrected.
It depends on which restaurant you're talking about. I wash dishes at plenty of restaurants out in Carmel Valley.
But today we have Congressman Panetta, who has a very storied and wonderful past record of public service, including his time as an assistant DA, his time in working in the military, and he has a lot of eloquent comments to make about Fort Ord, but in particular we want to hear congressional comments today. Congressman Panetta.
Great. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that introduction. Mayor Rubio, Chairman, thank you very much. Other members of the FORA board. It's an honor to be here, especially in this capacity. I appreciate this opportunity to say hello to you. And you shouldn't start off like this, but I will. I apologize for not being here sooner. But fortunately or unfortunately, the legislative schedule has put me back in Washington, D.C. most of the times when your meetings are here, almost every time. And so once again, I apologize for not being able to make it, but I am glad that now we have this break in August, that I'm here and can let you know what we've been doing or not doing for the past 8 months in the United States Congress and in Washington, D.C. As I stated, and I can't stress enough, it is an absolute honor to be here. I grew up with Fort Ord. As I said just earlier today, I'll never forget living over in Carmel Valley and basically hearing and seeing the flashes of the ordinances up over the hill. And, that's something that you couldn't imagine today. But what we can imagine today and what we've seen today is basically FORA living up to its vision, living up to the vision of the former Fort Ord, and basically hoping that this can be the three-legged stool of protecting the environment, providing an excellent education, as well as providing economic development for not just Marina or Seaside, basically for the whole Central Coast. And so it is an absolute thrill that I get to be here and talk about what's been going on and how I can continue to support you and your efforts here. as I stated, it's been a very busy time, as you can imagine. In the 30 weeks up to this point, since January 3rd, where I actually raised my hand and took the oath, we've been back in Washington, D.C., per the legislative schedule, about 24, 25 weeks of those 30 weeks. The Republican majority sets the schedule. Therefore, they're the ones who laid it out. They thought they were going to, with a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican by name and by title in the White House, they thought they were going to get more things done than they have. And so we're back there. When we have been cranking away. We've actually, I have voted during this time, actually pressed the button on the House floor 437 times. 437 times. So although it may look like on some of the big issues that things are not getting done, the fact is that Congress is working, and I'm going to report to you that there are a few issues, some important issues, especially to the people here on the Central Coast. We're actually working together on things to get it done. Trust me, as a new member, ever since I got elected, literally the week after I got elected on November 8th, we had new member orientation. And I have been drinking from a fire hose. There's no doubt about that. From new member orientation, from getting sworn in, and then working with or dealing with the administration that's there in Washington, D.C. And it has been, there's no doubt about it. I'll be the first to admit it. It's overwhelming. But I can say that as that spigot continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and more information continues to come at us every day, every hour, the fact is that you realize your capacity, and you just keep on swallowing and realize what to swallow and what not to. It's called judgment, common sense, something I learned from my family, and something that has played an important role in the last 8 months, and I'm sure will continue to help me as I navigate through this congressional schedule. The things that I'm proud of. Now, like I said, you're hearing about healthcare. You're hearing about the lack of any sort of proposal on infrastructure. You're hearing about the impending budget negotiations that are going to be coming up when we get back. You're hearing about tax reform, but you're not seeing anything get done, unfortunately. But I can tell you that if you look between all that, you will find that things are getting done, especially for our veterans. We passed the Veterans Choice Program, which allows vets to seek health care in communities if there are long wait times at the local VA. We passed an accountability legislation, which makes it easier to terminate problematic employees and incentivizes whistleblowing and gives the Secretary of VA greater hiring authorities to fill vacant medical center director jobs. We passed legislation that overhauls the Veterans Administration basically, and when it comes to appeals. It basically speeds up the appellate process. You have 500,000 veterans at this time who are contesting under appeal a VA benefit decision, and it can take years to get through. This legislation creates certain queues that speeds up that process, especially for certain queues where these veterans claim they have evidence to present to fight their appeal. We passed the Forever GI Bill, which eliminates the 15-year window in which you have to take advantage of your GI benefits. It's called the Forever GI Bill, meaning you can take advantage of those GI benefits as long as you live. And then something that I co-authored with Republican Congressman Neil Dunn out of Florida, one of my freshman classmates, we passed the Ensuring Veteran Enterprise Participation in Strategic Sourcing Act. I didn't name it, I just wrote it. If I named it, I would have called it Investing in Veterans Act. And basically it ensures that small businesses owned by veterans get their fair shake when it comes to determining contracts with the GSA. It's a minor thing, but it means a lot to those veteran small-owned businesses. And there are other bipartisan issues and other work that has been getting done. Thanks to the work of Congressman Sam Farr, I worked with Republicans David Valadao, Jeff Denham, and Paul Cook, all California Congress members, to move through the Clear Creek Management Bill here in San Bernardino County. Basically, that legislation, which was easily passed out of Natural Resources, which I was on, Natural Resources Committee, it unanimously passed the House. That legislation will open up Clear Creek Management District to off-road vehicles, which it was at one point. Unfortunately, there was a report that, how can you say it? It wasn't quite wrong, but I think the EPA went a little too far in regards to the natural asbestos that's down there at Clear Creek that can be kicked up by motorcycles at certain times of the year. However, they did the proper analysis. The asbestos is not as bad as they reported, and therefore we're able to open that up, provide for off-road vehicles at 20,000 acres, and then another, I think, 60,000 acres will be dedicated to wilderness down there in San Benito County. That's something that we will continue to work with the U.S. Senate on at this point, because now it's in their House, but we'll make sure that we follow it, track it, so we can get that passed in the Senate and hopefully signed by the President. I have also joined several bipartisan caucuses. What I mean by that is that in order to be on these caucuses, you have to join it with a Republican. That means you have the same number of Democrats as you do Republicans. One, very important, is the Climate Solutions Caucus, basically trying to address issues, working with Democrats and Republicans to deal with issues that affect all of us, especially when it comes to climate solutions. One of the things that I'm worried about and I'm tracking is basically rising sea levels. The person I joined that caucus with is Scott Taylor, Republican congressman, former Navy SEAL from the Norfolk area on the East Coast. They are under a more significant threat from what I've read and have been reported to me. The East Coast is more subject to rising sea levels than the West Coast, especially in places like Norfolk, where we have Navy bases. Therefore, it's not just a threat to the security of communities, it's a threat to our national security. And so we are talking about those types of issues, and it's nice to see Republicans and Democrats talking about potential solutions for climate change, in dealing with climate change. I'm on the Tuesday morning bipartisan working group, where every Tuesday morning we come in and we discuss the upcoming legislation that is going to be voted upon in Congress, and also any members around the table who have legislation that they want to get bipartisan support on. And so we talk about that, and then I'm also part of this Problem Solvers Caucus, where you have, I think, about 43 members 42 members of the Congress, same number of Republicans and Democrats, who are coming together to talk about solutions for big issues. The most recent, and look, and we know our limits. Tax reform is going to be difficult to talk about. I admit that as a Democrat. But the fact is that we came up, just recently, we came up with a solution for our health care in dealing with that, and certain proposals and certain potential pay-fors, and not repealing, but repairing the ACA. And so we're hoping that that's something that the senators consider, and hopefully that's something we continue to work on when we get back to Washington, D.C. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It is not. As I've learned, and as you all know, nothing's easy in Washington, D.C., unfortunately, and it takes a hell of a lot of work, but that's all right. That's what we got sent there to do. And so that's why I think the people on this Problem Solvers Caucus, Republicans and Democrats, they understand that, and they're willing to take the necessary risk to put forward something that's going to help all of the American public. Speaking of bipartisan caucuses, I created with Republican Congressmember Rodney Davis from Illinois a Ag Research Caucus. Obviously, being from this area, the salad bowl of the world, I understand how important agricultural research is to this area. Rodney Davis does as well, and so he and I have created this Ag Research Caucus to highlight the necessary research that needs to be done and continue to be done for our agriculture, especially our specialty crops right here. Not only dealing with pest and diseases, pest and disease control, but also being ag tech. Obviously, we all understand that the immigration problem is something that's not going away. The lack of labor problem is something that's not going away, and affecting growers, shippers, farmers, and farm workers right here on the Central Coast, and we need to deal with that. And one of the ways we can deal with that lack of labor force is trying to create new technology. Trust me, you go out in the fields, as some of you know right now, when you look at the machinery that's out there that harvests our crops, you ask them, where is it made? Inevitably, they're going to tell you Europe, Spain, Portugal, Netherlands, countries that have had to deal with a shrinking labor force, had to deal with high labor prices, and so they've mechanized. Those products, though, that machinery, they can't handle the girth of the United States agriculture. And so they break down. I believe it's incumbent upon us here in the Central Coast and in the Salinas Valley and the Silicon Valley to continue to come together to create new technologies that can help continue to make that this place is continue to be called the salad bowl of the world and help feed our nation. It's not just a security problem economically for us. I believe it's a food security problem for us. It's a national security problem for us, and we got to continue to deal with that. On that note, I'm continuing to work on immigration issues. I always heard throughout the campaign, as I hear to this day, immigration reform is the #1 issue for this area. Why? Because we understand the economy here. By far, we know the #1 industry is agriculture. We know that our agriculture relies on specialty crops. We know that the success of those specialty crops is dependent upon a labor force here. We've been spoiled when it comes to that, but now we're dealing with a shrinking and aging workforce here in the United States, here in the Salinas Valley, and we're not having people come here, and therefore farmers are basically letting crops go fallow. I heard this yesterday in the Ag Farm Bill listening session I had at Hartnell College with 2 other congressional members on the Agriculture Committee. This is an issue, but it needs to be an issue just like health care that needs to be addressed with Republicans and Democrats coming to the table. This is a big issue. It's a difficult issue, but I think we can get there. And I say that based on what was done in 2013 with the 2013 Senate Bill 744 bill that passed out of the Senate, but unfortunately was not put forward by the majority in the House. Comprehensive immigration reform. Yes, it dealt with border security. Yes, it dealt with a visa, change in the visa process. Yes, it dealt with a pathway to citizenship, but these were based on a compromise. And that's what needs to be done when it comes to immigration. That's why when I first got there, I reached out to Congressman Jim Costa, Democrat. I reached out to Jeff Denham, Republican. I reached out to David Valadao, Republican. And I said, we need to write a letter telling the president how important immigration and immigration reform is to the Central Coast and the Central Coast agriculture. I wrote the letter. They signed on to that letter. We sent it to the president. Now, I don't know if he ever read it. Who knows? But the fact is that it's there. It's in the system, and we've made it known. And this is the type of bipartisan work I believe that needs to be done, especially when it comes to immigration reform. I mean, we haven't had anything done since 1986 when there was a Republican in the White House who was willing to take that risk, who was willing to do something on immigration. And I have to be optimistic that we can get that done now. I want to. We need to. It's something I'm going to continue to work on. Unfortunately, being on the Agriculture Committee, we do not deal with immigration. That's under the Judiciary Committee. Nevertheless, it's an absolute thrill, and I mean that. I love being on the Ag Committee. It was my first choice being there. Sam Farr, he was first on the Ag Committee. That guy before him with a similar nose as me, he was on the Ag Committee first right out of the chute. I really enjoy it. It speaks to me. There's something about it that I don't know what it is. But I also enjoy the people on there, Democrats and Republicans, because we're actually working towards our goal right now, and that's the Farm Bill. That's why we had that Ag listening session. It was quite an honor to have the ranking member from Minnesota, Colin Peterson, take the time to come out here and listen to our farmers, our farm workers, our anti-hunger advocates, and our consumers yesterday at the Ag listening session to hear what their concerns are and what we should look for in trying to put into that Farm Bill. It's interesting because if you look at that Farm Bill, you have 80% of it, which is a good thing. 80% of it goes to nutrition, food stamps, okay, SNAP program. 8% goes to conservation. 6% goes to crop insurance. 5% goes to commodities. The other 1%, that's where our specialty crops fall under. Research, horticulture, organics. So we got to fight for that. We got to make sure that that type of funding for our crops are there in that Farm Bill. That's why it was great to have Congressman Costa, Congressman Peterson here on the Central Coast in the salad bowl of the world listening to all of you to hear their concerns. So I truly enjoy that. I was on the Natural Resources Committee. That was my second committee assignment, which was fine. But I have to tell you, it's unfortunate because that committee is a very partisan committee. And inevitably during the votes in the committee, the majority would vote one way and the minority would vote the other. It was rare that you had them coming together, unfortunately. And there were just clear differences. So now I'm on the House Armed Services Committee. Not at my choosing. That spot came open, and I did apply for it. And fortunately, the leadership of the Democratic Party decided that would be a good fit, and I agree with them, based on my background as a veteran, based on the fact that we have close to 15 military installations here in Monterey County. It's very important that I'm on there to make sure that I'm not only learning about the two subcommittees that I'm on, oversight, tactical, air and land, but also the fact that if there is a potential for BRAC coming up, that's something at least I have my hand on the pulse in dealing with that. And dealing with Michael's showing the Team Monterey brochure that I'm sure all of you know well about, and the number of installations there. But look, I think, and I believe, the reason I got into this job, the reason that inspired me to run, the reason why I'm here is because the importance of service that I saw growing up. In the sense that, to this day, people come up to me and tell me about the service they received from their Congress member. Personal service. That's why I'm here. That is my number one priority, to serve the constituents of the 20th Congressional District. I hear and I see now firsthand how important that service is. Dealing with an immigration issue, dealing with the VA benefit issue, dealing with the Social Security issue, dealing with an issue like we heard last week, where a loved one unexpectedly was visiting on vacation in Italy and unexpectedly passed away. Actually fell and got in a coma. And they wanted to bring him back here. But they were willing to basically, say that it's a coma. He's not going to recover for it. We're not going to recover from it. And so they're willing to basically take him off life support. Well, Italian law says you can't do that. So they were in a real bind as to what to do. They called our office. We helped as best as we could. Unfortunately, he passed away. The gentleman passed away. But I went and visited with the family yesterday for about an hour. And we were just doing my job. My staff and I, we were just doing our job and dealing with that issue, with that question. But to me, the gratitude that they expressed for the help that we gave them is something that I will never forget, and something that I believe is why I'm in this position, why people are in this position, why all of you are in the positions that we're in. But it's been busy. It's been busy. We have people on the Central Coast are very active politically, which is a good thing. Just to give you an example of that, last year, the congressional office received 40,000 forms of communication into the office. Emails, telephone calls, walk-ins. Total for 12 months, 40,000. It's been 8 months. We have received 77,000 forms of communication. So we are completely overwhelmed. But that being said, I make it a point, my staff makes it a point, and they know I make it a point to respond to each and every person. The worst thing you can tell me, hands down, the worst thing you can tell me, and I hope you do tell me if this happens to you, the worst thing you can tell me is, Jimmy, I called your office, I emailed your office, and I didn't get a damn response. Tell me that if that happens, because you will get a response, okay? The best thing you can tell me is, we contacted your office and I got a response, okay? Please be sure to tell us that. Yeah, that's why we're here. Now, obviously, local issues are important to me. That's why supporting the Ord Reuse Authority is important to me as well, and making sure that we all continue to fulfill the vision that FORA has and continues to have when it comes to the former Ord. In the talk I gave earlier today, I mean, like I said, that Ord contributed to our community. It contributed to our culture in more ways than one, not just militarily, but our diversity, economically, in a number of ways. I do believe that what's going on in Ord now is continuing to contribute to the Central Coast of California, be it with our education, be it with the protection of 20,000 acres in the Ord National Monument, and yes, the economic development you're seeing now taking place on Ord. And that's why I hope to continue supporting you in any way I can, especially when it comes to dealing with the Habitat Conservation Plan, the Ordinance Removal Plan, making sure that the federal agencies involved in those efforts are coordinated, that there's communication, and that we work to ensure the timely issuance of take permits as best as we can. We'll work to protect the Fort Ord National Monument, especially from any sort of executive order that comes out of the administration. I will be there fighting away to make sure that our monuments, that our sanctuaries are protected. We will continue to ensure, and we hope we need to ensure, that prevailing wage for construction projects on the former Fort Ord are upheld. Why? Because it's the law, and it's an important opportunity for our local trade members not just to work here, but to live here. And I will continue to fulfill the commitments to our veterans, make sure that there is enough federal funding for the expansion of the Central Coast Veterans Cemetery. We will make sure that that is, as I've spoke to many people, trust me, Jim Bogan was sitting outside waiting for me to come in this door, and he made sure I knew his concern. And as someone who worked on the Central Coast Veteran Cemetery Foundation, as someone who worked on the Central Coast Cemetery Veteran Fund to raise money for that Central Coast Veteran Cemetery, that is a priority for me for this area. I understand that, and I will do everything I can within my power to make sure that that expansion is done smoothly and hopefully in a more timely manner than the construction of the Central Coast Veteran Cemetery. Monday, I'm going to the VA DOD clinic to welcome those first patients there, the first veterans, the first service members who are going to attend there. I was not able to attend the grand opening, but Monday I will be there bright and early, meeting them and making sure that that VA DOD state-of-the-art health clinic continues to get the proper funding, proper services that it needs to serve our veterans right here in this community. And you know what? I am going, as a former, sorry, I'm a little biased, but as a former board member of the VTC, I'll continue to make sure that the Veteran Transition Center, as best as I can, hopefully gets proper grants in order to support our homeless veterans, giving them a place not only for shelter, but our services, which will help them continue being a part of this community. Look, I realize it has been only 8 months. Yes, at times it feels like it's been 8 years, especially in what I've been through, what we've learned. But it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning. And fortunately, I can tell you right now, hands down, I love this job. This is the best job that I've ever had. And I say that, yes, because of the work. I say that, yes, because of the service. But I say that mainly because of the people I work with. Don't get me wrong. There are some tough people in there. But, you know, as my father said, and he used a different word, if you know his, he likes to use profanity. He said, you know, look, you're always going to have to deal with jerks. And that's true. You have to be able to deal with jerks. But the fact is, I can report to you that those are few and far between in Washington, D.C., at least in the people I work with in the House of Representatives. I believe that I am developing a good foundation, good relationships, upon which I will be able to work with members on both sides of the aisle to get things done, not only for our country, but I believe we'll be able to get things done for our communities here on the Central Coast of California. Once again, it is an honor to be here. If you ever have any issues that I can help you, your families, your constituents with, please do not afraid to call me. Most of you have my cell phone, but if not, call my office and let us know how we can help you. That's why I'm here. That's the job, and I look forward to continuing to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Panetta. That's a lot of work, and you got it all done pretty quickly.
There's a lot more to do.
I'm sure there is. Are there any questions? Are you open to taking questions? Any questions for the Congressman? It's Dr. Ochoa.
Congressman, do you see any hope for, now that the healthcare skinny repeal failed in the Senate, is there any hope for the Senate and ultimately Congress trying the bipartisan route to healthcare reform?
Yeah, look, Dr. Ochoa, I do believe that there is a route. I have to believe that. I have to believe that, and not only from what I hope, but from what I see and feel in Congress. And I say that foundationally based on, first of all, what all of you see in the Senate, what took place with John McCain giving that, I believe, one of the best speeches I've ever heard on the Senate floor. And if you didn't hear it, I'd recommend that you YouTube it or you Google it, and you'll hear what I believe, not only what he stands for, what I believe the United States Senate and Congress should stand for. And after that, then gave his thumbs down on the vote. You're seeing senators who are actually starting to work together on both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republicans. But I also say that based on my time on the Problem Solvers Caucus, where we have basically come up with a proposal, put it forward, just sort of ideas. Okay, this isn't locked in, but it's kind of an outline of how we can hopefully work together on healthcare. Now, look, let me say something. I signed on to the Universal Health Care Bill, and I hope ultimately we can have that. But at this time, in this atmosphere, let's try to fix the ACA. And that's the attitude of the problem solvers, in the sense that we can deal, and I believe in some of the ideas that we came up with are making sure that cost-sharing subsidies are mandatory, under the mandatory funding. I think those need to be there for the individual market. We need to make sure that there's a reinsurance program when it comes to making sure that our insurance companies are protected. We need to look at the employer mandate and whether or not basically small companies have to continue filling out these requirements, these paperwork requirements, which I heard a number of companies come up and tell me what a burden it is on them. They actually have to hire somebody else to do it, to fill out that paperwork. So can you adjust the employer mandate, not the individual mandate, the employer mandate? And can you deal with the medical device tax and basically readjust that, making it easier? And do you also want to make sure that we continue to provide incentives for individual states? I mean, we're lucky in California, as we know that, what the state of California did. But there needs to be more incentives to help other states innovate when it comes to their health care. Now, the question is, how do you pay for this? And that's something that we got to continue to work on. But I do believe that you have certain ideas here that I think Republicans and Democrats, as we saw in the House, can hopefully agree to, not just in the House, not just in the Senate, but hopefully in the White House as well.
Mr. Moore.
So, Congressman, a quick follow-up on reform of the ACA. Is there any sense that you get from the Republican side that there could be any progress in a reform effort made on cost control of medical costs, which seem to have skyrocketed substantially, Martin Shkreli, et cetera, et cetera?
No. Yeah, no, look, are you talking about prescription drugs?
Not just prescription drugs, but hospital costs and so forth.
Yeah, no, look, I think if you look at those 5 areas that I just talked, there are compromises when it comes to dealing with that. I mean, if you're able to provide reinsurance to insurance companies, that's going to lower their cost. And that's important because, obviously they've been dealing with the category of very sick patients, which is the most expensive category. It's making sure that they are covered either through cost-sharing subsidies or through basically providing them a reinsurance, as it's called, to help make sure that they can continue to provide care for those patients. Those are ways that I believe we can do it. In regards to the costs, it will be difficult. But once again, at least if you were seeing a compromise on some of these issues, I think we can get to the pay-for issues as well.
Mr. Ullman?
Yes, Congressman, you've been tracking quite a bit with the money that comes through the Department of Defense that helps us for munitions and explosives removal, and I know you've been tracking how the budget's working for that, and I know the Army's getting ready to do some significant work this summer. Are you tracking with and you've also provided support for the FORA Reuse Authority's application. Are you continuing to pursue the additional funding for cleanup that would benefit all of us on the Central Coast?
Yeah, of course, Michael. You bet. I mean, that's something that's I think important for FORA to fulfill its vision, and it needs that support. You bet. And that's my job to make sure that I fight for that funding for you, for FORA, and for ultimately the cleanup that needs to be done here.
Okay. Well, thank you, Congressman Panetta, for joining us and giving us a good rundown of what's going on. Really appreciate your time. I know it's difficult for you to pull out of what you're doing, but we really appreciate your time and your candor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Ralph.
Okay, we're going to move on to Acknowledgments, announcements, and correspondence. Mr. Hulamark.
Yes, Chair. I think there are several. One, I think Congressman Panetta already mentioned the Spring Hill Suites grand opening. We've heard about that a couple of times, which was earlier today. I think the City of Marina should be congratulated on putting together a rather wonderful new facility in their community that provides this community a place for veterans' families, as Congressman Panetta pointed out, and families of the students from CSU Monterey Bay to be able to join us here. We also had the VA-DOD William F. Worley Clinic opening last week, and I know many of you were there and attended. That a very successful effort. For those of you that haven't been in, I want you to know that the cafeteria is open to the public, and on the way to the cafeteria, there is the mural that used to be in Stillwell Hall that Congressman Panetta's father mentioned several times over the last 10 or 12 years. It now has a home, and for those of you that didn't have an opportunity to see it, it's on display there and is permanently part of that clinic. A couple of days ago, the Army held a public meeting right here in this room regarding the Parker Flats Munitions Response Area. That's part of a program that we've been undertaking for about 10 years now. The Army was receiving comments from the community on the next phases of removing the conditions which restrict sensitive uses on those properties. I think that was relatively well attended. There were about 20 folks that showed up. On your table, you have a copy of the annual report. That is online for everyone to secure. Councilwoman Reimers mentioned to me earlier today that she had already taken advantage of it and made copies of the introductory sections for the Carmel City Council. So I know for any of you who are interested, it's easily accessible on the web, and all of you have your copy in front of you. A couple of upcoming events. The Monterey Bay Economic Partnership is having a forum this Wednesday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. in this room. That forum will be discussing economic development in the region. Also, our transportation workshop, we believe, will be scheduled for Wednesday, August 23rd from 2:30 to 4:30. Now, not everybody can make that, but it was our best shot at getting it to happen before October because of travel schedules and trips. We've now 3 times tried to reschedule the transportation workshop because we also are working with TAMSI, who has to be available. So there are multiple different reasons, but this appears to be our best shot at getting everyone here. August 23rd, 2:30 to 4:30. Is that right, Dominic? Okay. And then finally, we're just acknowledging that this is Steve Crow's first time at the board. It's also Congressman Panetta's first time here at the board, and those acknowledgments are mentioned. Did I get the wrong date? Steve pointed out that the Monterey Bay Economic Partnerships Forum is on August the 23rd as well.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is a consent agenda, which consists of approving July 14, 2017 board meeting minutes. And there's some corrections to the minutes. For item 8I, indicates motion passed, second vote as August board meeting, and it should reflect substitute motion. 8B, approved July 26, 2017 board special meeting workshop minutes. C, administrative committee. D, veterans issues advisory committee. E, transition task force status update. F, habitat conservation plan update. G, public correspondence to the board. H, prevailing wage status report, and I, the annual report for 1617. Is there anything on the consent agenda that anybody on the dais would like to pull for further consideration?
Yes, I would like to pull the item 8H, prevailing wage status report, just some additional questions. And I did note the chair said there were some corrections in the minutes. One of them is that at page 4 of our board report, it indicates that there was the ESCA presentation quarterly report. Presented the quarterly report, Stan Cook presented the quarterly report, and then the second paragraph said it's subsumed in what we were going to do at the next special meeting. So it should not state he made that report because he did not. So that paragraph needs to be modified. And the other question that I had just on the board minutes, because I didn't write it down, page 3, the substitute motion indicates a motion by Edelin, seconded by board member Moore, carried by the following vote, to approve the GSA letter to be sent to MCWD. And are they referring to Tom Moore seconding that motion? Okay. And I don't know, did Tom Moore do that? Seems contradictory to the MCWD's request to be the GSA. So it just startled me. I didn't write it down, I just noticed it. So if he did make it, he can let us know. Good. But that other...
Okay, those corrections are noted. Does anybody in the public wish to have anything pulled for further consideration? Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? All right, I'll bring it back for action. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Did you have a specific question on item H?
Yes, I did. So item 8H is the prevailing wage status, and this report indicates there are presently 3 different complaints that are pending in front of the DIR as I read it. The one related to Shea Homes Limited Partnership, that there's an assessment pending. Status of the assessment is unknown for $1.8 million. The Department of Industrial Relations investigating an item at Spring Hill Suites project. And thirdly, they're also been requested to make a determination about work at East Garrison Chapel project. My question is, what role, if any, does FORA have in these 3 pending claims with the DIR? Or are we required to respond or...
Chair, Member Morton, Sherry Damon responding. The Fort Ord Board has no pending action in the assessment claim and claim 1 or 2. And on number 3, there was an inquiry about FORA's interpretation of its resolution, but that has not been fully resolved at this point. So there's nothing about the DIR's determination that the FORA Board needs to, no action.
Okay, and that would be my understanding, but I wanted confirmation because it's in front of us for consideration as information/action. And then my next question is that it's noted in the last paragraph of this report that because the DIR is given substantially new powers of enforcement, that this could have, the sentence says, this could have substantial consequence for the region on multiple levels. A stop work order against a master developer may effectively stop the employment of local labor until it's resolved. It might have a deleterious impact on smaller contracts, making ongoing activity on the Fort Ord projects too risky to pursue or delay completion, and that we note that it might be hard on getting CDBG grants. So number 2, my question is, I thought the enforcement proceedings for the DIR was because we're trying to make sure everybody does comply with the prevailing wage. So I did not see why we would be adverse to enforcement terms as I'm reading this, or if there's something you're asking the board to do to find a better balance between enforcement versus the deleterious effect, the delays. What are you asking of us as a board through legislative, through our cities, through whatever way we're supposed to be helping?
The purpose of this paragraph is to reiterate to the board that there was a set of new state regulations and that the interpretation of those regulations could have some pretty substantial consequences. All the items that you read are possible consequences of the DIR's interpretation and application of their new rules. And the FORA staff has requested that DIR come down and talk to us as a community, not just us, FORA, but developers, contractors, labor organizations, all of us, about their new rules. And to date, I have not heard back from the DIR to be able to schedule that. Originally, it was contemplated that this would hopefully happen in the September-October timeframe, but that's still pending, that request. So there's no formal action for the board to take. This is a status update, so it's for information only, just to let you know where we are overall generically in the program.
Okay, so it's meant simply as a recitation of California law, not as a posture of the board.
Nope. Thank you.
I mean, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for staff on this item? Any comments from the public?
So I'll move.
Ron Cheshire, Monterey Santa Cruz Building Construction Trades Council. Unfortunately, the theft of wages from workers continues in Fort Ord. We don't know ultimately where this is going to lead, but we find it very unusual that now that the state's involved, no one else wants to be involved. What were you doing prior to SB 854? What were you responsible for? No one wants to be responsible for what's taking place out there. We've been talking about this for years. I'm looking at what's relatively a new board. Maybe you haven't heard the message enough. Maybe you don't care if it's not happening in your jurisdiction. But the projects that are taking place, FORA has rules and regulations. They have requirements. They have to meet consistency. Prevailing wages are to be paid. Workers are losing millions of dollars out there. And nothing's being done about it. We don't know what it's going to take to do something, but we're going to keep working on it. I have no idea of all the jurisdictions that are here, if you have any idea of the amount of opportunities that your citizens are losing out here. Carmel, you have no apprentices in your town. Carmel Valley has 2. Pacific Grove, you have 3. Monterey has 7. Gee whiz, I don't think Sand City has any unless they're thrown in with Seaside, and they have about 12. Marina has 14. There are 404 apprentices in all of the programs in Monterey County in construction. You're losing the opportunities that are here. These are good paying jobs. These are good careers for individuals to enter into. I know 2 guys that did pretty well at it over time. So anyway, this FORA does have a responsibility, but ultimately the responsibility lies within the jurisdictions where these developments are taking place. They're first in the chain. And we believe FORA has authority over what's taking place. But we don't know whether that authority comes from you, who have been sitting there wondering whether staff is supposed to be doing something, or is someone else supposed to be doing something?
Thank you, Mr. Cheshire.
And ultimately, we're going to get to the answer. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Ms. Morton, you had a...
Yes, I was going to move accepting the prevailing wage status report, item 8H.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. The next item is business items. Michael?
Yeah, the next item will be presented by Josh Metz. This is our economic development quarterly update. The board specifically asked that we make these more specific updates quarterly. We're going to have a rather large one, I think, probably in January, a much more significant one. But Josh has got an update from the last quarter.
Thank you, Michael, Chair, and members of the board, the public. It's an honor to be back in front of you again to continue reporting on the progress that's being made in the region of economic development, which seems to be a good time in economic development. If you look around, there's a lot of activity, and just to reprise what some of the graphics you've seen before, and then I'll give you an update on some of the numbers. These are the areas that we focus on and include university liaison and real estate development as a key function for our program. A bit of the background: you recall that the board took action in 2015 for an initial 2-year funding and then reaffirmed that program earlier this year. So we're continuing to work hard to support economic development for the region. Building on regional strengths, engaging stakeholders, developing and maintaining information resources, pursuing new business, and reporting. So this is the famous dashboard, and it's a nice graphic to look at the dark areas of progress and the light areas to be accomplished. And for those interested in the numbers, we provide those here in a table that is accessible. Some of the main areas of growth include the number of housing units and jobs. I reported earlier about our job survey, but the summary being we've seen a significant amount of new jobs, largely in an area of part-time employment, and I'll show another graphic about that a little bit further along here. But this is all available on the web, so these are links to the sources of the data if you want to dive into them more deeply. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have as well. This is an updated view of the housing starts. We closed our fiscal year 16-17 with the most amount of housing starts in 3 years at 3 different developments, 317 total permits through our office. And using the information reported by our jurisdictions, we're looking at a slightly lower number projected for next year. We'll just have to see what happens with that number. But it's nice to have this information to, again, get a sense of the trends and what's happening in continuing to grow the economy. This is our job survey, which we finalized in April. Again, 5,000 jobs in our survey from 4263 last completed in 2015. So a 15% overall growth. A big chunk of that in part-time employment, and that largely would be related to the restaurant, retail, hospitality industry, as well as it turns out, at some of the university positions. So we'd like to see the full-time employment numbers grow, but these do indicate progress and more activity happening for our community members. So specifically on programs that the board has taken a strong position on, supporting the Csumb efforts in entrepreneurship and small business, and sustainability and eco-recreation. So these set of images are all different events that and programs that are running through the Csumb's Institute for Innovation and Economic Development, and we work closely with them to amplify and improve on each of these programs. So this top one is a brand called Startup Monterey Bay, and it's organizing the entrepreneurship ecosystem in our region through a series of programs, starting with a hackathon, which is a way to get inspired and aspiring entrepreneurs and technologists together to generate ideas for businesses, feeding them up through a startup weekend that happens in January, and then leading to the Startup Challenge, which is the multi-month business plan development and pitch competition that results in significant amounts of funding being made available to facilitate the growth of companies. We have ongoing startup tech meetups, which continue to grow in numbers and popularity here in the south part of the Monterey Bay. Santa Cruz hosts one of the largest tech meetups in the country, a new tech meetup, and so that's definitely been an inspiration and a place to go to for techniques for improvement. On the sustainability and eco-recreation side, we're pleased to be working with the business school and in promoting and planning for the Greater Vision Water Forum, which will be held in October 6th at the Embassy Suites in Seaside. This will be bringing international water technologists and solutions to bear on local and regional issues. So we encourage everyone to pay attention to the media that will be going out about this and certainly to participate. Also mentioning again the Sustainable Hospitality Development Symposium that happened earlier this spring, and we're continuing to work with the business school on the resulting activities that we hope to encourage greater eco-recreation investment in the region. Update on UC MBEST. Again, these are the properties held by UC Santa Cruz, the development properties, 400 acres, different parcels, and we continue to work closely with the UC MBEST staff, Steve Matarazzo, and the UCSC team, which are advancing a specific plan through the city of Marina. It's moving to development of environmental review documents. Hopefully in the last quarter of this year, we have developed a marketing plan for the UC MBEST property, which we're working to implement. And the West Campus parcel, which is this one here in one, up on the north side of Reservation Road, is moving to a public auction imminently, let's say weeks or months, hopefully not much more. And that would then be potentially acquired for light industrial use. We're also continuing to entertain developers and provide context and connections for folks interested in these properties as well as others around the region that have development potential. We did, out of the Forbes AgTech Summit, make some unique, interesting connections with the UC ANR, which is the UC Agriculture and Natural Resources Division out of the Office of the President, personnel that fund and work with the UC Cooperative Extension around the state. We're able to give them a tour of this area and make them aware of the opportunity that the UC controls here. So we're hoping that leads to additional eyeballs and interest on this development opportunity. So the dunes at Monterey Bay continues to make progress. The opening of the DoD VA clinic was a big affair, and certainly will bring more activity to the region. Talking with the developers, they were talking about how simply the increased traffic to this site, whether they're residents or people who are coming to take advantage of the services, are attractive to companies that might want to locate here. So that'll help them increase the pace of the development there, as well as today's opening of the Spring Hill Suites, previously noted. Other activity, the Main Gate project, which this is Light Fighter Drive, of course, and 2nd Avenue, 50 acres here, working its way through the city of Seaside, and we continue to support their staff in advancing these plans. There's hope that this project could even begin moving forward latter part of next year. So that would bring a major new mixed-use development right here to fill in for all the value it will bring. Also, the Surplus 2 properties, which include, again, this is Light Fighter Drive here, so a major housing mixed-use development concept here for along Light Fighter Drive, as well as the south side of CSUMB campus, is advancing. The city is taking, this is a concept plan, working with a consultant that we support the selection of to produce a specific plan that would advance to the city and then come to FORA for presentation. But this is an exciting major project, and indeed the investment you're making in the building removal, which is continuing to advance with support of our staff, would enable this to proceed sooner than later. Other activity, you've seen this before. This is the idea that we have an opportunity to convey a message of forward movement, opportunity, show the great things that all your investments have enabled here. So this messaging is an important component, and for that we're working on what we're calling the 3 E's recovery progress video, and we have begun production on this. We hope to bring it back to you in October, which would be an initial overview of the pillars of the reuse plan, education, environment, and economy, and would live on the web and be used for conveying what's happened here to residents and prospective companies and other students who might want to come to the region. So look forward to that coming, and over this course of the next year, we hope to produce 3 other pieces that would dive into each one of these key areas a little deeper. They're about 3-minute videos. We've also been continuing with our community engagement activities, along with our weekly notices that go out through our email program and on our website. We also have been out in the community talking with the Salinas Chamber of Commerce, both in a presentation and subsequent articles in their newsletter. We had an opportunity to speak to the Fund for Homeless Women in Pacific Grove during your housing talk, and also through our web and social media activity. Finally, these are the upcoming events that were previously mentioned. The MBEP Forum, August 23rd. There's this interesting community capital event. It's a national event happening in Monterey about local economic development concepts from around the nation. So look for that, the Greater Vision, and a Startup Investment Expo, October 26th. So thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Josh? Okay. Well, from the public, any questions from the public?
Hi, sorry, I couldn't quite hear you saying for the public, so thank you. This is Jan Schreiner, resident of Marina. I know I serve on a board, but I'm not speaking on behalf of Marina Coast Water District right now, just on the community of Marina. And I really appreciate what you are putting together for economic development here on the former Fort Ord. And I just want to try to emphasize the importance and value of biking and the recreation trails out there. I didn't see a whole lot of events around that, but even as you're marketing to the developers, this is an important thing. It's a global trend. There's already bikes at the Embassy Suites and at the Sanctuary Resort, and I don't know if there are at Spring Hill, but I do know I went to the East Garrison Development of Monterey County sales office. I was intrigued by a mountain bike brochure, so I picked it up, and it's full of nature, and it has this awesome map of recreation trails. And I want you to notice it's the recreation trails, but the cities, the coffee shops, the taverns, nothing. It's only the recreation trails and the suburb, right? So it's the recreation trails that are selling the houses. There's not even a school marked on that one. I also went to the Sea Haven sales office. Again, similar thing. All the public access for the trails, not the city. No mention of Marina, no mention of Monterey. So this is, I think, a really important point, is that developers know how valuable this is. And so if you can focus on promotion on the trails and expand the trails, improve the access to the trails, I think our Fort Ord would really get some attention. Thank you very much. Oh, one other thing. East Garrison told us on weekends, cyclists are parking on the East Garrison property, going through the fence with their bicycles. So I think that's another emphasis. We really need more access for the public.
Is this considered an open mic?
It's a public comment on the presentation. 3 minutes.
On the presentation. I'll back off for a minute.
Okay. So if there's no other public comment or questions from the board, we'll move on to the next item, which is 9B, Groundwater Sustainability Agency presentations. Michael.
Yes, Chair, we are pleased to have presentations from the Salinas Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency and from Marina Coast Water District, leading to the second vote on the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, the draft letter. Jonathan Brinkman will lead this presentation, introducing. Well, Gary, you're going to do the presentation? Okay.
As just noted on the agenda, this item includes 2 presentations. The first from the Salinas Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency. That'll be the interim general manager, Gary Peterson. And then Marina Coast Water District will have their presentation by board member Tom Moore. And then it is agendized for a second vote from the last motion that passed at the previous board meeting. Just to note, the staff report the item was originally at executive committee broken into 2 items, and it was combined into 1. So the staff report does not reflect how it is agendized on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, board chair, members of the board. Gary Peterson, I am the interim director of the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency, and my day job is I am the public works director for the city of Salinas. A couple big hats. So a bit about SGMA. So 2014, we got SGMA. The single greatest change in water law in California in the last 100 years begins to challenge how we manage water in the ground. I want to give you a little background about where we are, how we got there. When this began, prior to this, there was a couple of years of very heavy-duty water work and a collaborative process that resulted in what many of you know as Pure Water Monterey. We were working towards some conclusion and getting some really good outcomes out of Pure Water, and the governor dropped SGMA on us. So we knew going forward at that point that it would be incumbent upon us to continue a highly collaborative process. So what SGMA requires is the sustainability agencies and development of sustainability plans for 127 groundwater basins. The threat of not getting this right is that the state will come in and do it for you. The state will also resolve overlap issues, and should a basin fall out of compliance at any time, the state is more than willing to come in and take it over and charge rates far more expensive than it would take for any of us, I believe, to manage the water. So again, it is a big change in water, a big change in thinking, and this is the steps forward, which is to form a sustainability agency in the Salinas Valley. It was determined, working with the Board of Supervisors and a number of other agencies, that it would be most appropriate to form a new organization to manage this water. There was no single organization existing in the Salinas Valley that was thought to be able to address all of these issues. Step 2 is to develop a groundwater sustainability plan by 2020. And I'll say more about what it tells you to do. But I think the really important thing is that nowhere does it tell you how to do it. It tells you what requirements that you have to meet. It tells you what you have to do, but it does not say how. And you have 20 years to bring your basin into sustainability. This is our basin, defined by Bulletin 118. As you can see, it's most all of the Salinas Valley Basin, which includes a number of sub-basins and pressure zones. And though you see it on this map, and there's some different colors showing different status, the entire thing is under duress, primarily in this portion with seawater intrusion and further areas overdraft. And we are not unlike many of the larger basins throughout the state of California that have to come to terms with what we've done with our groundwater. Important to note that for all of the forward-looking things that we're thought to do in this state, that we're one of the last 2 states to develop a mandatory groundwater basin management program. So for California, this is very, very new. So sustainability is defined by preventing 6 undesirable results. Seawater intrusion, water quality degradation, land subsidence, depletion of surface water. These are the negative consequences that the plan tells you you have to avoid. Again, it does not tell you how to avoid these. What it does say is that you will develop a plan that will prevent or minimize these occurrences. The agencies as formed legislatively have certain powers to prepare and implement sustainability plans, maintain sustainability, conduct public hearing on plan, submit annual reports. It also, the discretionary tools are studies to monitor wells, require extraction reporting, regulate extractions, implement projects, assess fees to cover costs, and rules and regulations. So many, many tools are given to use, but again, in no place does it say how those should be used and what is the best choice for any given situation. So the Joint Powers Authority decision was to develop a new agency. We had the Water Resources Agency steps up, and certainly the Monterey County Water Resources Agency has a lot of science, I think, which will become very important as we go forward understanding our basin and making these decisions. But a JPA authorizes a joint exercise of powers, can create we created a new legal entity. So there's a lot of reasons why you form a JPA. And we took that on, and we did it for timely formation. We had to have something in place by what was initially June of 2017, and that date has been extended through the end of this month to resolve overlaps and other issues with the state. You can imagine we are one basin in the state, and we have some conflict, there's no doubt, but if you take that and you multiply it by all of the basins in the state that are trying to accomplish this, you can imagine the Department of Water Resources pretty busy. It gives us liability protection and a governing board based on consensus recommendation. So we spent 15 meetings over 15 months, about 24 meetings over 15 months to develop the agency. Now, we did our very best to develop a representative board. This is not science. In fact, I will say that in my work, 35 years of service, and I thank the congressman for reminding us that service is why we're here and is what we do. This is one of the hardest things I've ever done, and it is a triumph of collaborative process, even though not everyone is happy, because as we all know, you cannot please everyone. But we did end up with this representative board, the city of Salinas, South County cities, agricultural interests, PUC regulated water company, environmental, a disadvantaged community, small water system, other GSA agencies, and a public member. So this is the board that we constituted, and then on top of that is the appointing authority. And this is an important distinction. A JPA is founded by agencies that have standing by government code to form an agency. Ag has no standing to form an agency. Environmental groups, unless they're certain types of groups, have no standing. So the agencies are the appointing bodies. We have the Board of Supervisors, you have the cities, and then they make the appointments that constitute the board. But this is the composition of the board, and these are the appointed. There were plenty of surprises when the appointments are made, and are we fully representative? Well, a lot of us will argue that back and forth, and we may not be in agreement. But we have started out with something that I think is extremely workable. And I think it's also important to understand with SGMA, with the biggest change in law in 100 years, out of the gate, it is not perfect either, and it's not entirely clear, and there are many things that will be sorted out as time goes forward. And as we take all of that and the uncertainty of a new JPA and this new massive legislation that we're dealing with, and then start to overlay that with a basin that has multiple interests and multiple sub-basins, we're in the process of figuring out just how the heck you manage this thing. So, and then how you're going to fund it. So for the first 2 years, through the generosity of these organizations, this is our funding stream, which gives us 2 years of funding. I want to be real clear that the county is not that generous. That includes a significant contribution from the agricultural industry that was absorbed by the county, but the county is certainly in there for at least half of that. And this is how we're setting up the JPA and funding it. Right now, we have an interim board, which will be finalized in October. We needed to get the infrastructure of the agency in place, and I sure as heck need somebody to get a permanent GM, because I need to be a public works director or something. So that's the funding stream, and that's how we set it up. So when we filed, and we did file for the entire basin, we realized that the first step was Marina Coast, who filed in a general boundary like that. I may not, these are the maps out of the filing, but they may have changed since then, which was an area extending beyond what we consider to be their jurisdictional level. I am not here to argue the law. We have lots of lawyers to do that and lots of people in Sacramento to do that. But what we do believe with this basin, with this area, and this we think is the jurisdictional boundary, but we're back here at down in the South County where Greenfield and the Arroyo Seco area formed a basin and bisected the entire valley. So what we believe the law says with the Salinas Valley Basin Authority is that you can form a GSA if you have standing within your jurisdictional boundaries. So our interpretation of that is that, and we have carved out the city of Greenfield, which has jurisdictional boundary and can be a GSA, and we've carved out the jurisdictional boundaries of Marina Coast Water District, who has the authority to become their own groundwater sustainability agency. Both have extended beyond those jurisdictional boundaries and filed for a GSA that includes those properties. So this brings up a number of issues. One, the interpretation of the law, and two, can you do this? So this is what the Salinas Valley Basin has done about that. If we've looked at that, we have had conversations with Marina Coast. We have had meetings down in Arroyo Seco and Greenfield. And what we did through our board is sent a letter to the State Department of Water Resources, General Counsel, saying we need your help to resolve this. Now that we know that we have to negotiate for a number of reasons. We know we need to negotiate. There are a lot of ways to resolve these overlaps. But first, we need to understand the actual legal standing. We know that any other groundwater sustainability agency is that we're required to create a cooperative agreement with. That includes going way south all the way down where we abut Paso Robles. We have to have a cooperative agreement there. We would have to have a cooperative agreement with the city of Greenfield and with Marina Coast, and then up at the other end it may be Pajaro that we have a cooperative agreement with. The purpose of that is to ensure management of a basin across the boundary so you don't get wildly different, mismanaged, unmatched basins. So we know we need to negotiate. SGMA provides a number of alternatives, and I think looking at the entire basin, I do not think that we can expect that all of the basins would be managed the same. They're very different. I hear anecdotally that it costs 3 times as much water to grow a head of lettuce in the South County as it does in the North County. And so you start to look at the economics and understand that there has to be different management principles. Again, what I'm saying to you, we do not know how we're going to do this yet. We've been in place since December. We're getting our structure built. We're getting ready to look at what a groundwater sustainability plan would look like. And more important, the piece that SGMA is entirely silent on is what does managing it look like? It does not tell you how you manage. Should you use fees? Should you use permits? We've had people talking to us about developing water markets. There are any number of ways to do this, but they are unknown. What is really important is that we built this on a cooperative basis and that we need to continue that level of cooperation and collaboration going forward so that we can all provide what we need, which is water. So I always like my W.H. Auden quote, the poet, who says, "Thousands have lived without love, but not a single one without water." So this is our job. This is a big job when you're looking at water, and people get very reactive. You know, we have the saying about, you know, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting over. 5 generations in the West, my life is bound to water and has been for generations. We have to work through this. This is our history. This is our legacy. Our industries are dependent upon it. But we are ready to negotiate and are really ready to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next is Marina Coast.
So many, many years ago, when FORA was formed, you essentially hired Marina Coast to run the water and wastewater infrastructure on the former Fort Ord. But one of the reasons, and I was around when this happened, that you did this was so that we could be your special advisors with respect to water. So I'm going to treat this briefing a little bit like I would when I brief a senior military officer. If you're briefing a 3 or 4 star general or admiral, normally you give him background that he may not know, you give him updates that he may not be familiar with, you provide him with advantages and disadvantages, potential options, and then you await his decision. Now, when you're briefing a military officer, that's one brain you're briefing, and if you're his specialized advisor, you probably know a good deal about what they want to know and how they think. Unfortunately, I have a room full of brains here, and some of you know different things. So for those of you who may see some things up here that you already know, I apologize. There's perhaps someone who is less familiar. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. I'll try and skip through things that Gary already covered on the what is called SGMA, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and then give you Marina Coast's list of potential options and recommendations. But of course, you are in fact the decision maker. Gary pointed out that there's 127 critical basins. This is a map from the Department of Water Resources, the state of California, showing the 515 basins and subbasins that agency over the years has defined. I apologize for the map size. I don't have all of California there. Of those basins, 127 are, as Gary pointed out, in sufficient trouble that SGMA applies to them. So on this particular graphic, it is those basins shown in orange and sort of light, darkish yellow approaching orange. You'll notice most of the Central Valley of the state of California is in trouble from things like water quality and subsidence. And of course, you're well aware that right here where we stand, the problem is primarily seawater intrusion. So this is what Monterey County looks like. And you'll note only a few green basins there. Those are the ones that SGMA does not apply to, a couple down in South County, but the vast majority of these, to include even the small Carmel River Basin, are considered part of those 127 that have problems. So here's what the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act has to say, and it's actually a pretty simple purpose. Bring recharge and pumping into balance and try and, at the very least, make things no worse under the law than the conditions were on January 1st, 2015. If you want to make conditions better than that, good on you, go for it. And certainly Marina Coast hopes we can get beyond conditions which were already partly seawater intruded on January 1st, 2015. The state, however, with 127 basins and subbasins, and by the way, I'm just going to use the word basin, so I don't have to keep saying basin, subbasin, and make a distinction between the two. The state really, really wants local plans. The State Department of Water Resources and the Water Resources Control Board really do not want to have to get involved in even 50 of 127 basins and all the local politics, local economic effects, and local issues associated with them. By the way, any previously adjudicated, court-adjudicated basins, such as the Seaside Basin and federal land, are exempt from SGMA. Of course, we have federal land and adjudicated basins immediately adjacent to us, and we would certainly hope we could coordinate with them so that they do no harm to us, we do no harm to them, and perhaps we can all get to future sustainability. So, here are the steps. Gary went over them. You find some eligible government organization that wants to become a GSA, wants to take on these problems, and that can include a JPA as the Salinas Valley formed. Those GSAs, once you work out who has responsibility for each individual basin or portion of a basin, you have to come up with a sustainability plan, and A through D give you some of the requirements that the Department of Water Resources and the State Water Resources Control Board are going to be looking for when they judge your plan. And I'm quite sure they will be taking a very close look at each plan that comes forward by the plan deadlines. Assuming you pass muster with DWR and State Water Resources Control Board, then you get to, as a GSA, attempt to go forward and implement that plan. And as Gary pointed out, the deadline for successful implementation is 2040, although nothing says you can't do it faster if that can possibly be accomplished. So in order to write a plan and execute a plan, here's the list of core important things that you absolutely need to be able to do. You obviously have to be able to write a plan. Certainly this body, FORA, is capable of writing a plan. You wrote a base reuse plan. Marina Coast periodically rewrites its urban water management plan, its strategic plan, its conservation plan. So both of our agencies have some planning chops. You have to regulate groundwater pumping. You have to, in some way, either by regulating groundwater pumping, decreasing the extractions from the basin so that natural recharge then meets what's being extracted, or you have to find ways to increase the recharge into the basin. You need to have the power to collect fees to pay for all of this, and the GSA management itself and planning. And because of some things in SGMA, you have to be able to work with other agencies. All right, we'll come back to that slide in a moment, but let's take a look at the Monterey County situation. There are 12 basins. One is adjudicated, that's the Seaside Basin. 4 are high priority, and 2 of those high priority basins are considered by the state to be critical. What that means is their sustainability plan is due January 30th, 2020. For the rest of the basins, the sustainability plan is due 2 years after that in 2022. So there's approximately 8 plans that have to be written. I note that farmers in the Salinas Valley like to use groundwater because even though there is surface water that flows through the Salinas River, it has this pesky little problem if you use it for irrigation, containing weed seeds and perhaps other chemicals, increasing costs of weeding and costs of farming. All right. Also note that the Ord Community, both Central Marina, served by Marina Coast, we're 100% at the moment dependent on groundwater from the 18400 and the Monterey sub-basins. So this is back to a slightly different map. I didn't change the colors. The state changed the colors. The gray are the 127 critical such basins. And so let's take a look locally. So the basins are numbered by the state. I didn't include the various numbers in front of these numbers, just the last digit. There are 8 basins. I'm sure you're looking at that and you say, wait a minute, you seem to be numbered to 10, but you'll notice I think 3 and 7 or something along those lines are missing. That's a consequence of past work that the state has done, which in some cases has merged 2 basins and 1 number went away as a consequence of that. So all those maps, if you care to explore this because you're into geographic information systems, are available at that particular website, and you can turn all sorts of features on and off if you care to do things that way. I've just extracted some of these maps. So in orange now is the Seaside Subbasin, exempt from SGMA because it's under a court adjudication order. The blue boundary is the boundary of the Monterey Basin, and the green area, as we shall see, is the current area that Marina Coast claimed in its notice of intent to become a GSA that no one disputed. And so on the 28th of December of last year, we became recognized in the green area as the exclusive GSA, and we now have all those GSA responsibilities there. Of course, later in the year, The dark purple area there, which is pretty much the balance of the Ord community that Marina Coast serves, we had filed for that back in September, but there was a competing filing made by the county on the 22nd of December, which then puts it in the state records into what they call overlap. And this is the issue that Gary Peterson referred to that hasn't quite been worked out, but we'll offer some options to you for that purpose going forward here in a moment. So there was our claim, and there was the SVB GSA, if you don't mind that acronym for Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency, their claim. And the only part that's disputed is the dark purple. The rest of the Monterey Basin, essentially south and east of Highway 68, was never disputed, never claimed by Marina Coast, and Salinas Valley Basin will, I have no doubt, become the exclusive GSA for that portion of the Monterey Basin. In addition, we indicated earlier that federal lands are exempt. So really, the, if you will, overlap dispute is only on that remaining purple area, which is, for the most part, the urban developed portion of the Ord community that we serve on behalf of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. All right, sustainability plans, there are a couple of different options the law gives you. If you have an entire basin covered by a single GSA, then it's pretty simple. That GSA writes a sustainability plan, gets it approved by the state, and off they go for another 20 or so years executing it. On the other hand, if a basin like the Monterey Basin is split between two GSAs, and the central marina portion of the Monterey Basin is now under Marina Coast, the portion over in Corral de Tierra, east and south of Highway 68, is part of the Salinas Valley Basin GSA. So somewhere in between those two boundaries, there is a split between these two GSAs. And so one option is for those two organizations to get together and write a single plan for the Monterey Basin. That's a fine option. But the law also offers a second option, which is for your two second areas, you essentially, there we go. Each develops your own plan. However, the law says two things. You have to coordinate your plans, and whatever data, hydrogeological data you are using in the development of those plans, you must work from a common database. That's all the law says. So Mr. Peterson's absolutely right. There's a lot of question about how we all go about this, and we're all novices at this process. So implications for the Ord community and for Central Marina. By 2040, we've got to bring it into balance in the 180, 400, and the Monterey subbasins. We're going to have to work together with the Salinas Valley Basin GSA on plans for each of those basins. Could there be new pumping restrictions for the Ord community? Well, I hate to say it, but that's a possibility. It's not something we're looking for, but it will depend on our ability to either do more recharge so that we can allow up to the 6,600 acre feet that you've all heard of before. So we hope we don't have to get to any sort of reductions below 6,600 acre feet. And certainly we are thinking about recharge projects precisely for the purpose of avoiding that. All right, so are there going to be some costs for Ord community customers for all of this? Well, simple answer is yes. But in fact, Marina Coast has been paying costs along these lines for decades. Because of seawater intrusion, Marina Coast, over its 50-plus years of existence, has had to take wells close to the ocean out of service and move them inland and drill them deeper and safely decommission the old wells. That has cost something. We've just spent about $250,000 on a special study examining the groundwater down to depths approaching 900 feet, which was reported actually last Monday, and I believe our general manager is going to have a fairly comprehensive preliminary report out sometime next month. You can ask him about that today if you like. We also, all of our property owners pay annual tax subventions to the Monterey County Water Resources Agency to help improve upstream basin recharge. And Marina Coast has had a very robust conservation program, which has cost us some money. If you live in our service area, you can get a nice little subsidy on a brand new washing machine. So there are costs to our conservation program. Will there be pumping restrictions or reductions? Well, actually, they already exist, because back in the 90s, both the Army and Marina Coast voluntarily did something that was fairly unprecedented in California. They agreed to permanent restrictions on their withdrawals from the 180-400 and the Monterey subbasins. That is the 6,600 acre feet per year that you've heard about for the Ord community, which includes the Army's rights of about 1,400, a little more than 1,400 acre feet, plus these other numbers that you see for other properties in the general area. And of course, conservation programs, even though they're generally speaking voluntary, have to do with reduction of withdrawals from the groundwater basin. Could there be further restrictions, as I've indicated? Maybe, but we're hoping not. All right, what about sustainability recharge projects? Most likely, our staff's already working on some ideas along these lines, and in fact, FORA is in charge of a three-way agreement where Marina Coast, FORA, and the Monterey Regional Water Pollution Control Agency, now known as Monterey One Water, are studying possible sources of water for the Ord community specifically going forward. And there's a possibility of additional water from RUAP. RUAP will come online in conjunction with Pure Water Monterey, and there's 1,427 acre feet of recycled water targeted for the Ord community in that project. Okay, just a reminder here of what a GSA must be able to do in order to execute as a GSA. You got to be able to write a plan. Well, you all and Marina Coast can do plan writing. You got to be able to regulate groundwater pumping. Well, I have to ask, who owns and controls all the wells that serve the Ord community? It's Marina Coast. I think, if necessary, we can regulate pumping. Can we do projects to increase groundwater recharge? Yes, we can. And in fact, we put those projects in a capital investment program, and you all have something to say once a year about Marina Coast's capital investment program. We collect fees from our customers, and you all once a year have something to say about the compensation plan under our agreement with FORA. And we've certainly demonstrated that we can in fact work with the public and with other agencies. This in fact is why the Pure Water Monterey project, one important component of it is the conveyance pipeline being built by Marina Coast, which will take 3,500 acre feet of water over to the Seaside Basin for injection. All right, so this is the part where there can be some dispute, but try to answer the question. So when you hired Marina Coast, you authorized us to exercise our powers as a county water resource, as a county water district. You authorized us to exercise those powers on the Ord community with certain restrictions that are all contained in the agreement between Marina Coast and the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. So what are those powers that a county water district has that's in the California Water Code? Well, for one thing, we can operate a water system outside of our political boundaries. We can supply, we can convey, we can make water. Secondly, we can establish rules and regulations for sale, distribution, and use of that water. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, we can restrict the use of water due to drought or other threatened or existing water shortage. And of course, if you're extracting more water from your groundwater basin than is going into the basin, that could potentially be a threat of an existing water shortage. So our view, our attorney's opinion is that we have all the tools we need to be a GSA, and there would be some advantages to this if we were the GSA for the Ord community or if we were simply recognized unofficially as such. First of all, because of our agreement with Marina Coast, FORA would get a say in pumping restrictions, in projects, and on fees. We've already agreed to try and our best, our darndest, to help you implement the base reuse plan. All right? We certainly own all the water infrastructure, including the wells, and control the pumping for there, except for the retained Army water rights. And of course, we have to serve the Army under our separate contract with them. We certainly have a long-standing relationship with all of the various customers, to include CSUMB, United States Army, UCM Best, the developers, and our individual customers in the Ord community. We're already essentially managing or attempting to manage groundwater as well as we can in the local area. And we're already required under SGMA, as Mr. Peterson pointed out, to coordinate with the SVB GSA specifically for the sustainability plans for these two basins, the 18400 and the Monterey Basin. And we would intend to also coordinate with the water master of the Seaside Basin, because we really don't want to be doing something in the Monterey Basin that would end up harming the Seaside Basin. And we'd certainly love to discourage the Seaside Basin water master from doing anything that would harm the Monterey Basin. So that requires coordination, even though it's not specifically called out in SGMA for requirement. Now, this is the board of directors of the Salinas Valley Basin GSA. I have to say I only know 4 of these folks. They are well qualified. They are well intentioned. I think personally, given some of the work that they have to do that Mr. Peterson laid out, they may be a little crazy to have taken it on. I believe that the qualifications only call for 20 to 40 hours of work a month for, I don't know, 3 cents an hour or something. They're not being paid very well. But they're all qualified, well-intentioned people, and they are going to do the best job that they possibly can to represent the interests that essentially nominated them and appointed them to this board. But I see some disadvantages should they be the entity operating as the GSA for the Ord community. First of all, they have a huge workload. 8 separate basin plans to develop, 2 of which are due in less than 2.5 years. They have far more political interests than to deal with across those 8 basins than we have just here in the Ord community. So they've got just a heck of a workload in front of them. They could have the power to levy fees on the Ord community, and interestingly enough, SGMA does not require any vote of the electorate or any Prop 218 process for those fees. I'm not saying that the SVB GSA would go there. I'm just pointing out that that would be a power. They don't, in our opinion, have a particularly significant interest in the Ord community, and they're already juggling enough interests from South Valley to North Valley to urban interests in Salinas, for example. And neither Marina Coast or FORA have any representation on the SVB GSA board. And they don't have the same sort of personal relationships that Marina Coast has with these various customers on the Ord community. So, some alternatives. You take your second vote today and essentially issue the guiding principles and take no further action. That's certainly an option. Another option would be to simply write a letter to the SVB GSA and say, we'd like you to withdraw your notice of intent and essentially cede it officially to Marina Coast. Or you could ask the SVB GSA to simply agree on paper that Marina Coast, in conjunction with FORA and its agreement with FORA, would serve as the GSA and work out the problems for the Ord community. Or you could, I suppose, in theory, ask Marina Coast Water District to just withdraw from the Ord community as a GSA. We would still be the service provider for the Ord community. We would still operate and own the infrastructure, which we currently own. So you can probably guess which of these options would be at the top of Marina Coast's recommendations to you. But this is, in fact, your decision. So I'll take any questions that you may wish to ask through the chair.
Let's go ahead and get public comment. Two questions. Yeah. Get through this shit.
I'm Jan Schreiner, speaking as a resident of Marina, but I'd also like to add a couple of things from my experience, and I think you did a great job, Vice President Moore. The board of the Marina Coast recently dedicated $200,000 funds for creating the plans, and I just wanted to make sure people know that the board decision did include the Ord community, so it's not as if the board is acting in a financial vacuum on the Ord community's GSP. The other thing that the board has appointed a negotiating committee so that when the SPV GSA is ready, there is some negotiating that we're ready to do, or that the Marina Coast Water District Board is ready to do. I also want to mention in my experience with the Environmental Caucus portion of the SPV GSA, we had a meeting this week. Janet Brennan is the current representative of that caucus as the interim and is being recommended by the caucus to continue on that 11-member governing board when the seats are permanent. That decision needs to be ratified by the Board of Supervisors. But she mentioned also that on that advisory committee, there's about 23 to 25 members, and probably I could get that clarified by City Manager Gary Peterson. On that advisory board right now, they've just added someone to represent Chevron, and also Curtis Weeks, I understand, is participating. But there is no one, even on that 25 or 23 member advisory board right now, representing the Ord community. She mentioned there's not a huge amount of momentum yet. They're still trying to organize who's on, who's off, that kind of thing. I just want to mention also something I heard Gary Peterson say. I want to say it's not really a conflict in the sub-basin. It's a shared responsibility. I work with kids. They sometimes think they have conflicts, but actually they just need to learn to share. And I think that's where we're headed, is we're all learning to share on the groundwater. In the past, it's always been first come, first serve, and now we're learning to share to make it sustainable. I've heard a lot of concerns about annexation, the problems with Fort Ord, but remember, there's no representation on the Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency at this time. And that pumping restrictions that were mentioned in the presentation, I really appreciate that. I wanted to just mention quickly that AEM study or research that Stanford did is really a fraction of the cost of some of the groundwater basin study that Monterey County just did, right? So we're starting to see graphics like this out of that study, which are awesome displays of red being seawater and blue being freshwater, and the break there being the Salinas River. And I hope that no matter what, the Groundwater Sustainability agencies will be able to use a similar kind of research to that. It's a lot less expensive, and it's a lot more data than the well data and well trends. Thank you so much.
Hi, George Riley. Tom, could we go back to the slide of the 4 options, please? I just want to suggest that FORA made a decision a month ago, to issue guiding principles and not take a very strong position on the whole issue of Sigma. You seem to be willing to let the county kind of fight it out, and I just use that word as vernacular, over the differences of the boundaries and the different responsibilities between the two in order to find some way to cooperate. But it seems to me that with FORA having such widespread jurisdiction over this community, with such powerful jurisdiction over what happens, that you're missing an opportunity to play a role here. And I would hope that you seriously consider option B or option C as a role to play, because otherwise you punt. And I don't know if that's where FORA wants to be. And I don't think that's where FORA should be. There is a role to play. You play it. This is very much a part of your responsibility. The water rights issue is predominant on so much of what you do. And the future on water rights, the future on volumes, the future on control, the future on cost, the future on allocations, all fall within this jurisdiction. And you're punting on that issue. I just hope you take seriously the options of B and C and kind of refer it to the transition committee, refer it to a special committee, somehow get a significant discussion on what they mean to FORA, because if you want to punt, that's okay, but it seems to me you're missing an opportunity to play a role. And I just think option A, which you've done, is a pretty weak position for FORA to be in. If that's what you choose, I hope you think about it more, because I think the last time you had this discussion, you were under the gun of acting before the end of the month, and there was not much time to discuss it. You didn't have this presentation, you didn't have this kind of background. And I just hope you take a little more deliberate time to think about what your options are and the implications. And I would encourage you to seriously consider B or C. Thank you.
Hello, FORA board members. I am Teresa Kohler, a resident of East Garrison since 2015. When we purchased our home, we were provided very little information about the water situation. I don't remember hearing the word annexation. I certainly didn't know what FORA was and that FORA would actually be my representative in all matters water. So I've come to learn a lot more in the last few months, and specifically for purposes of today's discussion about the GSAs. And so I've spoken to you before with my personal opinion, but since the last FORA meeting, I've also talked with more of my neighbors in East Garrison. And I have a petition here with 50 signatures from East Garrison residents who have now learned a little bit more about this issue. And what it says is we the undersigned, demand that FORA support Marina Coast Water District to represent us as the Groundwater Sustainability Agency and not the Salinas Valley Basin GSA. As an aside here, I have nothing against Salinas Valley. I just did their half marathon on the weekend. It was great. FORA must honor the agreements made with the U.S. Army and not allow another agency that has no infrastructure or service history with us to manage the required groundwater sustainability planning of the Ord communities. So I ask that this be entered into public record. I'm providing you a hard copy and a thumb drive. Thank you.
My name is Kathy Biala, and I'm a resident of Marina, and I would like my comments to be entered into the public record, please. I and others have already spoken strongly on the issue of supporting MCWD as the exclusive GSA over the Ord communities, and we will continue to advocate for this at many different venues. The residents of the Ord communities are educating themselves right now on this issue and will not go quietly into the night. Just as there are water wars occurring here and in the region, so does the Ord communities intend to express and strongly advocate for their right to be represented by MCWD, who has been their reliable and affordable water purveyors by MCWD for many decades. For this FORA board to not acknowledge and support this is to demonstrate other political agendas at play rather than fairness and the logical extension of what has occurred for a long-term basis. MCWD has been a leader in the pursuit of AEM, ERT, state-of-the-art imaging over the majority of the Salinas Valley groundwater basin, and owns infrastructure, and is a water manager, and also a water purveyor for 33,000 residents. Why should the Ord communities wish to be under a new JPA whose concerns for them are questionable based upon the board composition, which will minimize their voices? Please listen directly to the people of East Garrison and Preston Park, what they want. They are the ones directly affected by both the GSA representation and the annexation into the MCWD, and they have absolutely strong preferences for the MCWD. Do not make decisions that ignore their requests. Thank you very much.
Tom Mancini, it's George made a pretty good comment about the items number 1 and 2. As you all know, I'm not happy about the Marina Coast Water District not having Ord military community members representation. Finally, somebody from other housing areas have stepped forward to do so. I think you guys could have sit down with the large users, which is the Army, CSU, and B. By the way, the number of users on the Ord military community are probably twice the number of the complete city of Marina. I think about August of 15, there's like 4,000 connections in Marina City proper, and there's over 3,000 or 4,000 connections. There's almost double the number of connections on the Ord military community, so you have twice the number of users. So I think somebody needs to get together with the big users and find out how they want to proceed. I mean, the people from East Garrison have spoken, the people from Preston Park have spoken. I think you need to sit down and talk to all of the representatives of the different communities.
Good afternoon. Paula Pillow and people of Preston Park have not spoken, but they're just about to. I represent 568 households. I don't know how many people are there. We have been serviced by the Marina Coast Water District, first by the Army. Then all of the assets were transferred to the Marina Coast Water District, and as most of you know, we have had our issues over the years about the rates, and we've also had our issues about annexation. However, this is a body of people that are responsive to us and responsible to us still, and we are in the process, hopefully, of annexation, which we would really appreciate, so we have representation. The Salinas Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency has no representation of our residential communities, and it's mostly residential and it's expanding. So we would strongly urge this body to consider item B or C. We need this agency to be one that's familiar with us, that's serviced us, that's already providing us sustainability, conservation plans, and we do not want another agency having the ability to perhaps enforce or implement any pumping restrictions that may be paying attention to the interest of the agricultural community rather than to our residential community. We want this to remain in the hands of Marina Coast Water District. That's 568 households, probably 4 people in there. So now you've heard from Preston and Abrams Park. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Berkeley. I came today really just to listen, but after seeing these presentations, which I thank you both for, really my general concern is about the community and the people at large and who's leading them and who's interacting and caring for the overall citizens. My concern with Salinas Valley GSA is that a lot of their advisory and leadership is more connected with big ag despite their desire to be more inclusive. I think MCWD has done a great job so far, and I'd like to see FORA vote in support of them and either choose B or C as options. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Moore, for that wonderful presentation, and Mr. Peterson, thank you very much. We have tremendous respect, of course, for the Salinas Valley GSA, and I'm from Marina, so I'm prejudiced at the get-go, but I love the Marina Coast Water District. They've done an outstanding job. They're in the top 21 groups that have reported for conservation. They're way ahead of everybody else in the state practically for their conservation efforts and their ability to restore or recharge. For example, the fresh water dune sand aquifer and the 180-foot aquifer. So we have nothing against, having one GSA except for the fact that you will be losing out by not having the expertise of the Marina Coast Water District. They have been managing it perfectly. They have a golden track record for management and conservation of water for the Ord Community and the Central Marina. So they have the infrastructure. The Army trusted them with all their infrastructure and allocated to them the water rights. And so you would be losing out on their expertise and their goodwill to want to do a good job. It's extra work for them, of course, but they want to do it because they're already doing it. So you would benefit from their expertise. So I urge you to make a wise decision for B or C and not discount the beautiful Marina Coast Water District. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lois Newstead. I am an East Garrison resident and may very well be the person least informed about this water situation in this room. One thing that concerns me right off the bat is hearing that ag money is supporting whatever they are supporting and putting money into this, when I would feel like the majority of East Garrison residents aren't aware of any of this. One thing I've heard, well, at East Garrison's last Homeowners Association meeting, a good majority of time was spent on water leaks. And I haven't heard anything here today about conservation, but apparently some homeowners at East Garrison are getting water bills that are at least $800 or more. And the problem seems to be water leaks that because of what we were told at the meeting was different gardeners, blah, blah, blah. No one is really taking responsibility for them. And I feel like that's a problem that someone out of all of the people here with all of this knowledge ought to be looking into. Everyone knows the soil is sandy, but yet when they're using drip irrigation systems that are getting clogged by sand, and then the people, ending up getting a huge bill, something needs to happen. So that's all I have to say.
Any other public comment? Okay, bring it back for action.
Chair, I call for the second vote on the draft letter.
Is there a second? Okay, the motion and second. And the motion was to approve the GSA letter to be sent to MCWD and Salinas Valley GSA.
May I ask a question? On the statement of principles. So it's my understanding that the statement of principles reflects that there was an agreement between the Army and our Monterey County Water Resources Agency. But in the chain of documents that are now on the FORA website related to the Transition Task Force, there are documents that include contracts where the infrastructure and the right to be the purveyor of water were transferred to MCWD. And I don't see how that doesn't appear to be reflected in this statement, and I think that would be a critical issue in the statement of principles to reflect that.
Well,
it seems to be omitted.
Well, it's not really an omission. What we're saying is implement the Port Order Use Plan, implement equitable allocation of water, and manage groundwater resources with an enduring local agency. Those are the principles.
They're the principles, but also there's contractual relationships that pre-exist identifying what FORA's role, who we are in relation to both of these entities. And I thought that would be appropriate in the principles in what we're sending to the two agencies that are competing.
If I may.
Yes.
I just want to clarify the motion. The motion today is to vote on whether we send this letter with the principles attached, and this is the second vote.
Right.
On that, is that correct? Thank you.
Okay.
So I would like to offer an alternative motion that we
no
send the letter.
Motion. We're voting on the second. Vote.
So, Mr. Giffen, is it possible to make an alternative motion?
Not on a second motion, no.
Okay, well then I'm not going to be supporting this motion. I think we're really abrogating our responsibility. If it's okay for me to comment on the motion that is on the table. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to support it. I think we're abrogating our responsibility to the people that own businesses and live on the former Fort Ord. It makes absolutely no sense to have dual bureaucracies. It makes no sense to have an agency that has no representation of the local community make decisions about pumping, fees, etc. And we have a history of working with Marina Coast Water District. Sometimes it's been troubled, sometimes it has been good, but we have a history of working with them, and it makes, again, I don't see the value. I would really appreciate somebody explaining the value of having another agency make those kinds of decisions.
Ms. Reader.
Speaking for myself, and I think some others here, first of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Moore and our other presenter. They were outstanding presentations. They were far better than I thought they would be. I learned a lot by watching those. Okay, that's number one. We have the two representatives here. We have two key players, Dr. Moore representing the Marina Coast Water District and Joe Gunter. I consider several members of the Marina Coast Water District my friends, so I don't. However, the organization as a whole has sued CalM 5 times. If any of those lawsuits would have gone through, it would have shut down the test well for what we're trying to do with the desalinization plant. It would have screwed the Monterey Peninsula as far as getting replacement water for Carmel River. That was vital to the Monterey Peninsula. That to me shows not you individually, but the organization as a whole is not looking after, as not being a good player overall. And for me, it's a matter of trust. On the other hand, we've got Joe Gunter, the chair of the Salinas Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency, has done more to break down the lettuce curtain between the Salinas Valley and the Monterey Peninsula. He's gone out of his way to bring additional water onto the Monterey Peninsula. That to me shows one heck of a lot of trust. So as far as I'm concerned, if I'm going to trust one agency, not individuals, but one agency over the other, I will go with Salinas Valley. They've shown they can be trusted. They've earned our trust for the most part. Now, I'm recommending we don't put we do not endorse either one. Why? Because of the two key players that we have right here. It's going to be a legal decision. It'll be made by the state. We don't need to get involved in a legal decision per se. I'd like to let the state just do it. At least I think that's the logic that was indicated in the last couple of meetings.
Okay. Dr. Ochoa.
I'm going to be perfectly frank. I asked my staff about this, and they expressed from a technical standpoint, I guess, in terms of their job, somewhat of a preference for Marina Coast Water District, mostly because they felt that they would be more directly accountable to them. So they pretty much put on the same hat that every community has put on that's made public comments. But I can't help but feel torn between that natural impulse, which is somewhat parochial, and the fact that the whole philosophy driving this organization here is to take a regional approach to issues. And it's hard, I don't know the science behind the groundwater issues well enough, but it seems to me I would be surprised if we could totally silo groundwater sustainability decisions in the Fort Ord area from what's happening right next to it in the Salinas Valley. And so it seems to me that really the geography, the topology of the groundwater basins are the ones that should be driving how to organize ourselves, how to structure ourselves to address it. If you're trying to develop a sustainable approach to a natural resource, you let the resource dictate how, what the scope of the organization should be. And I suspect that if we siloed groundwater sustainability measures here in isolation from an organization that's right next door to us, you create the same kind of problem that we have when we try to do economic development in one area next to the other in isolation. It doesn't work. You just end up beggaring thy neighbor. So that's why, philosophically, I'm more supportive of a more global approach, a regional approach to this issue. But I don't know the specifics enough. I don't know that any of us are experts enough on this, and that's why I felt a lot more comfortable expressing those lofty principles and letting that sort of be a context for the decision that will be made by the state.
Director Moore and then Director Vogel.
So Dr. Ochoa is absolutely correct when he says that these individual basins are not totally disconnected from one another. There are connections. Those connections in some cases are very direct, in other cases appear to be quite subtle. But if I left any of you with the impression that Marina Coast under B or C are suggesting any sort of siloing, then I have blown my briefing to you. SGMA requires that we work with the Salinas Valley Basin GSA. It was some 2 months ago when our board selected 2 board members to forward as a negotiating committee to work with however many board members the Salinas Valley Basin decides to appoint to begin negotiations, because with respect to the 18400, we only have 2.5 years to get a plan together. The plan must be done regionally by these 2 agencies under SGMA. So we do truly have Marina Coast really does have a quite regional perspective. I think sometimes where, for example, Mayor Edelin disagrees with us is over the specific hows of going about best achieving that locally. But that's okay. So the only other point I want to make is, or maybe it's more a question for Mr. Giffen. So this is a second vote on essentially what is option A up there. That is or correct. Rather, the motion from last month was to forward the guiding principles to the 2 agencies. So I'd just like to point out that, go ahead, forward the 2 principles, the agencies. It seems to me that that does not preclude this body from deciding next month to also do B or C. And perhaps even between now and next month, our staff talking with the Salinas Valley Basin staff may come up with some appropriate thing to offer up to you that would essentially satisfy both.
I would agree with your interpretation. I would agree.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Venter.
I've listened very diligently, and I appreciate the passion that comes from the people at East Garrison and from Marina and from Mr. Moore and from Mr. Peterson. We on the Salinas Valley Groundwater Sustainability Agency have fought our own battles within the House, and I had to laugh when people talked about large ag running this organization. It's really being financed mainly by Monterey County and the city of Salinas. Our whole goal is that we do not allow the state to come in and take over our water, because if they do, none of us in this room will be very happy, because that $800 water bill will be sent to the state just to pay for their plan. What I'm hoping is, and I know that Mr. Peterson and Mr. Moore, I may have to do them like we did the housing people, lock them in a room with crazy glue. We'll let them out when they come out with some kind of an agreement that we can all work together. Whether anybody likes it or not, we all have to work together, or this plan for anybody will not work. If we separate Marina, Salinas Valley, and it does no good. We have an opportunity here to work together, and I think that's really what our direction should be, and not be fighting with each other. Because all I see is this is creating disharmony that we don't need, and we need to make sure whatever we do takes care of the people that live in this community. That includes ag. We have to put up with them. They, unfortunately for most of us, don't realize the water that Marina's pumping in the Salinas Valley Basin is coming from the underground that goes right by all those farmers. So we're all for everybody working on this together and not making enemies out of an issue that I'm hoping that as adults we can all get in one room and make this work. Thank you.
Mr. Reimers.
My understanding is that for the Ord community will still have Marina Coast, and I'm moving in that direction. And my personal opinions are not going to be my vote today. My vote has to do with the bigger picture and the fact that this is a very technical and a very multifaceted question and answers that we are still, as a community, as a broad community, working out the water issues. And my understanding of working together and of the two agencies working together is a direction that I would want them to go, and that Fort Ord and FORA has a great deal of other issues that we need to be concerned with. So I would put my preference in the hands of the experts who know what they're doing, both of the agencies, and make it very known and very clear what Fort Ord and FORA needs to have and what the Ord community needs to have by the letter that has been drafted.
Okay, let's go ahead and have a...
So I have a problem with what was presented is the political jurisdiction should decide what is the GSA, and I think it's more appropriate that the service jurisdiction is the GSA. And MCWD owns the pipes, owns the right to pump this water and to provide this water. The ability to get along, the ability for cooperation, which I respect Mayor Gunter and what he is indicating, all that MCWD is saying is give us as the GSA, because we're the GSA for Marina proper, because we're the server, we're the provider for that city, give us also in our GSA the area of Fort Ord that we are also already the provider pursuant to contracts and obligations that pre-exist. The counties still will be part of the broader basin, and both these agencies will still have to cooperate. It's basically about management of, is it, and these are just 10,000 acres, or is it management of 20,000 acres? I don't know what the acreage is, but you understand my point, in what is 100,000 acres of basin. And it does seem appropriate, when, especially when we are the board and we are the voice for all of these individuals living on the former Fort Ord property, to be here. And MCWD does not have a seat at the table of the GSA, of the Salinas Valley GSA. They were excluded from even being at that table. So yes, these two agencies need to cooperate. But if I'm a tenant at Preston Park, if I'm a tenant in East Garrison, if I'm a tenant at Abrams, I do understand and see the value of the GSA being the same entity that is controlling how much is pumped and how they deliver that water. And there are limitations. The county, the FORA board, MCWD, 5,200 acre feet of water has to come from this 180, 400-foot aquifer for the development that every jurisdiction sitting at this table wants to have on our peninsula. And so to have another agency coming in and saying, well, you can't get your 5,200 acre feet because of the limitations and the impact on the quality, and the water is going to go someplace else. We need to have MCWD be the groundwater sustainability agency, live up to the commitments, the contractual commitments that are made for the development of Fort Ord, to develop and pull from the 180 and the 400, the 5,200 acre feet, which is already limited contractually, and to meet the GSA limitations that you can't do that and sacrifice the quality. And they need to govern both aspects of that management of our basin. So I don't support this action that we're taking a second vote on, and I do think the principles are grossly inadequate in that they've left out important contractual relationships that pre-exist. So I'm not supporting it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and make some comments myself and then call for the vote. The whole issue of whether it's a jurisdiction or some other thing is in the state documents. It's got to be by the jurisdiction. So we would like to have something else, but that's what it says. The fact that we have people from Preston Park and Abrams and East Garrison is great. But I don't see anybody here from the Highlands. I don't see anybody here from the Ord military community who have issues with Marina Coast Water because they have no representation. Absolutely none. And but they don't come here and complain. They complain to me, but they don't come here and complain. So it's not a perfect situation. But if the state is going to unravel this based on jurisdictions, then we should not really insert ourselves into that discussion. What we got to do is let them know what we intend for the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, what we expect from either one of them, whoever turns out to be the GSA, that these are what we're looking for. And as far as those contractual obligations, they remain. The ceiling remains, the levels of service remain. And if the GSA from Salinas Valley were to say that you have to restrict your pumping, that would mean that GSA from Marina Coast Water would have come to that same conclusion based on science. So I don't think that argument really makes a difference. But that's the way I feel about it, and I'm going to call for the question. Roll call vote, please.
Director Edelin? Director O'Connell? Director Morton? Director Hoffa? Director Rubio?
Aye.
Director Alexander?
Aye.
Director Carbone? Director Gunter?
I'm going to abstain to send myself.
Director Garfield? Director Reimers?
Aye.
Yes, motion carries. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
As having voted in the affirmative on this particular matter in the majority, I would this time like to make a motion to reconsider the vote that was just taken on this matter and set it for the next month's hearing. If I get a second, I'd like to be heard on why.
Second.
I think that when we took the vote back in July, or perhaps it was even in June, the problem that existed was that there was a presentation to be made that was not available for whatever reasons, although it was set on the computer. We now have a situation with two presentations that have been made, and you can see from the many, many, many advantages of MCWD being the GSA in this, but Mr. Peterson did not provide any advantages whatsoever from not having MCWD. It's obvious. It's so obvious. But that information wasn't provided to us when we first did it. And I must commend Board Member Hoffa for pointing out the facts as they exist and the importance of having MCWD. I think the further problem that exists is that members of this board, specifically Mr. Hoffa, attempted to make a motion to bring this up and misunderstood that since it's the second vote, we cannot do that. So I think by making this motion to reconsider, I would hope that the members of this board, none of the supervisors are here, by the way, would consider bringing this back next month, now that we have a lot more information in front of us and we have additional time to ask questions of Mr. Peterson and Dr. Moore if we feel it appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor in a second to bring this back in reconsideration next month. Any questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Public comments are fine.
You have public comment? Go ahead.
Hi, Teresa Kohler again. I would just like to say that for those of us who are out earning a living every day, to come to a meeting like this or to become educated on these complex water issues is difficult. So the fact that some of the military community has not spoken here, has not objected, I think is probably because they don't know anything about it, or most people. Most of the people in East Garrison I spoke with had no idea of any of this. So I think it's not an opinion one way or another by those neighbors in the Ord communities that aren't East Garrison, Preston Park, or Abrams. It's just ignorance. Thanks.
Yes, that is correct. The people don't know. As a matter of fact, Chair Rubio, as you are well aware, in the past when we've had Proposition 218 process, not only did I represent Abrams and Preston, I also represented some of the developers, Seaside Highlands, and some of the military community. I doubt that they would be happy with this if they were aware of it. And I also want to say that I've heard many times that this is used to sort of character assassinate the Marina Coast Water District, that people there have complaints. They are still at least going to the Marina Coast Water District Board, making their comments and being heard. That is just simply not going to be the case if we go this other route. I think that most people here are missing the fact that this Marina Coast Water District, who provides the water, who owns the assets, who has the history, who has done the conservation program, and this is mostly a residential area. You're talking about Preston, Abrams, CSUMB, and I did represent CSUMB at one point in Proposition 218 proceedings. And you're talking about all of the Dunes developments, the Shea Homes properties, the commercial developments. This is not agriculture. This is a totally separate community that's already well managed. Even though I have issues with the rates, as Mr. Moore knows, Dr. Moore knows, it is well managed by the Marina Coast Water District, and it should continue to be, and it should be the GSA. So I do hope you will look at this again. I think you're really missing the points here. Thank you.
Jan Schreiner, and I feel like I need to correct a couple of comments that were made in the discussion. Someone mentioned about CalAm suing Marina Coast Water District. They actually thought, the speaker thought, the Marina Coast sued CalAm 5 times, but it was really CalAm suing Marina Coast Water District. And I think that's an important distinction to make, that our public water district has to fight against the corporation so hard. That CalAm also threatened eminent domain on CEMEX during the time of the discussion around the test slant well. Also, the test slant well damage to the freshwater pressure head that I briefly mentioned before, that was established and now is documented. So CalAm has been quite invasive to our community, and I just want to make sure that that's really clear. If Marina Coast Water District has been involved in lawsuits, it's because they are being invaded. The jurisdiction versus service area question that came up before for me at an Association of Environmental Professionals. For SGMA, according to Santa Cruz County official John Fisher, that is not a question. SGMA is service area. SGMA is service area. So both Santa Cruz County and Santa Clara Valley Water District were at that meeting, and they were explaining that to the Monterey County professional, Mike Novo, who represented who was on the announcement for the Association of Environmental Professionals, was a man named Les Gerard, who had to step out of the SGMA process because of a personal financial conflict. Now, there was a comment about water decisions being based on science, and I think that it is possible. But there are also a lot of priorities when it comes to water decisions in the political realm, and that not all of the priorities are going to be science-based. And that's just an unfortunate statement of the times. So those are the 3 main things I wanted to correct. Marina Coast Water District did not sue CalAm 5 times CalAm sued Marina Coast Water District. The sigma is not based on jurisdictional boundaries, it is based on service area boundaries. The county or the now SVBGSA actually invited the state in by filing an overlapping application. Had there been no overlap, the state would not be involved. And then not all water decisions are based on science. So the same conclusions that Marina Coast Water District might come to for the Ord community may not be the same as the SVBGSA, who is ag represented. Thank you.
Michael Baer from the Monterey Peninsula. I just have a couple of comments. I agree that this idea of the service area should be the determining factor. It seems like common sense, and I really feel for these people who live in these communities, and we're relying on you as their governing agency, and you're saying, sorry, we're going to, just sorry, service area doesn't matter. It's not the important factor. And as far as CalAm and the suits between Marina Coast, I mean, if Marina Coast is suing them, it's because CalAm's going after their water they have no rights to, and they're concerned that it's going to impact their ability to deliver water in the future, where CalAm has no rights. And I don't want to be stealing water from my neighbors so that I don't have to pay. And finally, I just find it disingenuous to invoke people that aren't here to say how unhappy they are about Marina Coast. If they were that unhappy, I think they might show up.
My name is Kathy Biala. I'm resident of Marina. Since it's been brought up by the board, a board member about the annexation, I really hope that this board will support MCW, the Ord communities being annexed into the MCWD jurisdiction. And that is another topic that I think is extremely important and should be discussed thoroughly at this board. And I spoke about this.
Can I just remind everybody, the public, that the comments are going to be limited to the issue at hand, which is the reconsideration motion. So let's limit our comments to that, please.
Thank you. And in the context of this discussion on this topic, bringing up from the board again about MCWD suing other entities, and I don't have the facts, but I was glad that Jan Schreiner addressed that. I think, again, a second time, I think that's terribly inappropriate to bring that up in the context of the discussion about this letter. So I hope that again, we could figure out how to contain that kind of comments that are not relevant. So thank you very much.
Okay.
I hope you all aren't getting tired of us from Marina, but we're here because we care. We really care. And I think, Mr. Peterson cares. I've been at his meetings. He does an outstanding job, with the advisory committee. Mayor Gunter was there when one of their meetings, and we were all happy about the wonderful collaboration, the spirit of goodwill. Why? Because everybody wants what's good for the whole, the public good, the benefit of the whole. And not, even in the Army, at the Pentagon, you have all the different services fighting against each other because they want a bigger rice bowl. I need a bigger aircraft. I need a bigger.
We're going to talk about reconsideration of the vote, okay? If you have a specific comment on that, you're very welcome to make it. Otherwise, we need to move on.
I'm sorry. I wanted to compliment Mayor Gunter for his input because I think that's the direction we need to go in. We need to work together and collaborate, and hopefully you will be able to, vote for B or C. If you want to reconsider, we're happy to come back again to talk about it and give more information. Oh, you're shaking your head. I'm sorry.
It's time.
Okay.
Yes, hi. My name is Phil Clark, and I'm a resident of Fort Ord and Bayview. And I just want to share with FORA that this is where we are. This is where Marina Water is currently. This is this top line is where we were in 2013 in pumping. This is where we are now.
Sir, do you have a comment on the reconsideration motion? That's what we're talking about here.
Okay.
Okay. If you have something, please give it. Otherwise, we need to move on.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, let's bring it back. There's a motion to reconsider and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. So the motion fails.
I did, but I'm Councilwoman Morton. Was there anyone else? Okay, 2 or 3. Thank you.
Can we get let's get a record of who voted properly. Who voted aye? Okay. So there were three ayes for reconsideration and the rest noes. So the motion fails.
Okay, the rules state that before we can take any further action, we have to extend the meeting. We must have public comment.
I move we extend the meeting by 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. Your second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, public comment is now open. On general. Yeah.
Public comment for items not on the agenda.
Oh. My name is Gunnery Sergeant Ray Hallett, retired from the United States Marine Corps. I'm here to represent a company, or not a company, but an art organization that is trying to find some property here in this area. Some of you might be able to give us a hand. I hope you can. In fact, I pray you can. I've been doing some research, and I ended up talking to Mr. Josh Metz, I believe it is, and he told me that the property, it's a little late to try to get the property through the government because now it's already turned over to the cities and counties and what have you. So I appeal to each one of you to at least consider what I have to ask. We would like to develop a multi-million-dollar retreat here in the Monterey area. We need acreage to house approximately 1,000 people. Now, these are long-term numbers. We would like to be able to bring in handicapped service Marines, Navy. By the way, how many of you have been in the Army? How many in the Navy? Marine Corps? Well, it's about a tie. So I was afraid here that I was going to be taking a needle and trying to put it into the back of a porcupine. So, but it's pretty good. So I've got a good chance maybe. Anyway, I've done a lot of research on this area and many other areas in the United States. Our long-term goal is to have one on the East Coast, have one on the West Coast, and one somewhere in the middle of the United States. Somewhere where the handicapped Marines, former Marines, Navy as well, would be able to come at a low cost and enjoy your country, your part of the country. And I would think it would behoove you to at least consider our offer. We do need the property. We've considered you first, and I hope that you will at least come and talk to us. Now, we're on the internet, and it's under MarineHouseUSA.com. Look us up. We're under construction and redoing it, as I think everybody seems to do nowadays. But we still have enough information on there to tell you and to show you. There's a video on there Right under the picture, there's a few items to do, and one of them says video. Just click on it. It'll show you the type of buildings that we are considering. Now, we understand that, okay, maybe you don't like a 5-story building. Well, I don't either. But if you don't, we're not going to consider it. If you only want 2, we'd consider that. If you want us to spread it out, we'll do that.
Sir,
I'm sorry.
Your time is up.
Oh, my goodness gracious. I didn't know I was on a time. And I have one more thing if I can. Well, it's about the water thing. Okay. I'm from Las Vegas. It cost me about $13 a month.
Any other public comments on matters not on the agenda?
Matters not on the agenda? Okay. Annexation was not on the agenda, correct? So, was there an annexation item on? Oh, part of the letter. Yeah. That's true. All right. Well, I just want to say that the Seaside County Sanitation District, which Ralph Rubio is also part of. I'm sorry that he left. But they've been really stonewalling for quite a while on that piece of the water district business. So it's unfortunate that he brought it up again today when he doesn't also include in his information about annexation that as Seaside County Sanitation District representative, he's part of holding that up. The other thing I wanted to mention, I was at the Monterey Peninsula Mayor's Water Authority last night. They were discussing the possibility of feasibility study for deciding on a public eminent domain process on Cal-Am. It was a very interesting, lively discussion. And one of the things I want to make sure to bring to your attention was Catherine Stedman, who's normally a very nice PR person for Cal-Am. She was explaining to the mayors how eminent domain would be fought by Cal-Am in the court system, and there would be lawsuits, litigation, I believe is the term she used. So I just want to make sure that you are all aware about that too, that Cal-Am is not only suing Marina Coast multiple times, but they are threatening to sue the rest of the Monterey Peninsula should they investigate the option of public water for the Monterey Peninsula, simply to discuss a feasibility study. What's right for your constituents brings out the threat of litigation from that corporation. So please keep that in mind as you make your decisions. Don't worry about being intimidated by Cal-Am. It's possible that an eminent domain could happen and that you'll be dealing with local elected officials. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schreiner. Anyone else in the public? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Any comments from any members? Really? You have 4 minutes left.
I'll take one. In our discussions of parking ordinances, we have discovered that the people who live in Pacific Grove who have RVs that are currently parked on the streets would not be able to leave those cars, those RVs or trucks or whatever, parked in their neighborhoods. This is common for many of these communities, and we've run out of storage space for RVs. Not people living in them, but RVs, boats, whatever. Does anybody with any land on Fort Ord consider this as an entrepreneurial opportunity? I think it is.
Thank you. Rhetorical question. Thank you. We are adjourned.